Welcome back to the Director's Commentary series on the Spector Creative channel for Masters of the Universe Classics. I'm your host, Scott Toy Guru Neitlich, the previous brand manager on the line, and we are going into the 2012 special 30th anniversary series. We've already done Fearless Photog. This was going to be an additional second sub for the 2012 year, which was the 30th anniversary, including this new awesome, cool logo bug that was on the back of the packaging. The idea behind the 30th anniversary line of 6 additional figures on top of the regular monthly sub was original characters that had never been seen before, that you were going to discover for the first time as toys, the way the vintage line was. That was the unique emotional connection. And of all the figures that we released, probably the one that became, shall we say, the popular girl in the line, and well, actually they were all male figures, but the most popular figure in the line was probably by far Drago Man, the figure that was created by the Four Horsemen. And looking at him, he absolutely looks like a Four Horsemen creation, especially if you're familiar with more of their original work from things like Mythic Legions and Gothtropolis. He just had that very horseman-y look, which is perfect because that's what he's supposed to have. I was really excited to have the Horsemen create a brand new character. And MOTU didn't have any dragon characters yet. I mean, you had things like, construction worker type characters, you had fireman type characters, you had, cowboy type characters, but there was no dragon action figure. Wait a minute. Hold on, did I just name the village people in Masters of the Universe? Motifs are motifs, what are you going to say? Alright, so back to Drago Man. So he obviously started off as a sketch from the Four Horsemen as they designed what their character would look like within the quote-unquote rules that we provided, that he needed to use shared parts, about 50% shared, 50% new, because we couldn't fully tool a character, but otherwise we didn't really give them any creative direction. We didn't tell them what theme to use. We didn't tell them what type of character. And it was their imagination, and they came up with the idea of doing a dragon-based character, basically because they wanted to do a figure, and Eric from the Horsemen actually emailed me about this. I told him I was doing this video. His rationale was they wanted to do a figure that was going to fit as if it was part of the original release. It was going to have that look and feel of the first 8 that got released, that mystery and magic, and they wanted to use that man name, like it was Merman and Beastman and He-Man. So many of the original figures had, Tila didn't have man, but obviously, neither did Zodak, actually, if I think about it. But, Stratos, too. All right, most of the figures had the word man, and I mean, Stratos was originally going to be called Wingman, after all, and Zodak was very late to the party. He replaced the sorceress as a second figure, or the goddess, when she was combined with Tila, but that's a video for another time. The point is, a lot of the original figures had man in their name, so that's why the Horsemen wanted to call him Drago Man. And, we'll get into the naming of the figure in a little bit, but it was all about tying the figure visually into that feel of the original 1982 look of the line and those original releases. And dragons were a huge part of Masters of the Universe as far as the lore, as far as the animation, as far as all of the different media and all of the content that had come out over the years. There were always dragons. There were good dragons, there were bad dragons, there were fire dragons, there were ice dragons, but we never had a dragon action figure. I mean, eventually we did Granomir, but he's an oversized giant beast. By action figure, I mean, a regular size figure, not one that, dwarfs Orca like that. And it wasn't just Filmation. There were, of course, dragons in all the animation. In the 2000X series, dragons played a big role, both fighting against the heroes and being allies with them. And, of course, dragons were represented in the vintage line through things like the Dragon Walker, which actually won Mattel's Toy of the Year back in the day. Dragon Walker is also appearing in the 2000X line. And, of course, there was the Dragon Bones, or Battle Bones, originally called Them Bones. But, he was dragon-esque as well, being a carrying case and or a beast to ride. He came alive in the mini-comics. I remember that painting was amazing. I love the vintage paintings. But yeah, dragons were everywhere, yet there was no dragon figure. We had bees, and we had lizards, and we had skeleton men, but nobody was actually a dragon, despite them showing up constantly throughout Masters of the Universe. I mean, the closest we probably had was Dragon Blaster Skeletor, who was Skeletor with a mini dragon tied to his back, or chained to his back, or, chained to his hand. Either way, there was no figure that was a dragon personified, and the Horsemen felt that this would be an amazing theme to do their figure of. So they sculpted one up. And again, no direction from Mattel of how they should do this or what theme. We just wanted them to create an original character that would be seen first as a toy, as per the whole 30th anniversary line. That was, going to tap into this very, very unique Masters of the Universe emotional connection of discovering characters first as toys, which I think you don't really see that much. And we wanted to play that up as much as possible. And it made sense to have the Horsemen create one of these characters. And since they designed all the tooling, they knew all the parts they could use, which included King Hiss parts, of course with the shoulders this time attached correctly, as well as the legs. But he did need, obviously, new parts, new armbands, new hands, new feet. He got the King Grayskull longer loincloth. He had the Whiplash tail, which I don't know if a lot of people realize that he used Whiplash's tail. A lot of people were commenting that it was an original tail, but the Horsemen being very intimately knowledgeable about what items were available, they knew how to create a character. One of the new pieces they did was the snap-on wings that attached to his back via 2 peg holes, and these would be ball-jointed peg holes allowing for some range of motion. Now, these were big wings, and I was able to sell them into management by explaining that this was an investment tool, meaning if we tooled up the wings with Drago Man, we'd be able to use them later on with characters like Granomir, Lord Dactyls there, as well as, who knows what else the fans would come up with or what other uses we would have, but it seemed like having giant dragon bat wings, while this was an expensive part to tool because they were so big, management was, convinced, shall we say, that we could look at it as an investment that would pay off with later figures, and they approved the giant wings. Otherwise, he would have been wingless. He was still pretty big, though. I mean, even if his head was so big, we had to turn it sideways in packaging. He would barely fit in that blister with the tail, and the wings had to be packed off, and the sword sort of turned at a front angle like that. It was full. And his name, Drago Man, while again having man as part of the name, being a harken back to the 82 line, originally the Horsemen wanted to call the character Dragon Man. But unfortunately, when we ran a legal search for the name, because you have to copyright all the names and pay fees to own them, Dragon Man was already taken because it's a Fantastic Four villain that had been released both in the 90s and in the 2000s. So that meant the name was not available in the action figure category. So Drago Man was the backup. Another issue we had was the horns, which originally, when they were attached by Mattel Design, It's on backwards! So we quickly rushed to fix it, and after showing the Horsemen the tooling master, they noted that the horns we had attached the horns backwards, so they were quickly fixed. And I'm glad, because I had enough backwards parts to last a lifetime on this brand. Alright, so one other issue, or not issue, but just thing to discuss, were his accessories. As I said, we gave the Horsemen pretty much carte blanche to create anything they wanted, and they really took that to heart and loaded him up not only with giant head, giant tail, giant wings, but he had a ton of accessories, and we just couldn't afford all of them. But I felt like I really wanted to do right by the Horsemen, because they were amazing partners. So we found a way to release the unmade Drago Man accessories in a weapons pack that was released a year later. We had shown all of the weapons at Comic-Con, and I'm a big believer in if you show it, you have to make it. So things like the sword and the shield with the flame, the flaming sword came with the figure, but the whip and the unflamed sword, and you could clip off the flame from the shield to do an unflamed shield, which was their intention. They wanted the shield and the sword to sort of be like, you could power it up with flame, if you will. I didn't do this with Mighty Spector when we had to drop the whip, And that was basically, I didn't want fans to think I was doing this, for self-service to make sure Spector got loaded up. But for Drago Man, I really felt like it was the right thing to do. And the Horsemen were just so great to work with, and they were such a big part of the brand that getting the rest of the accessories that they intended to go with him, even though we couldn't afford them with the figure release, I was really determined to find a way to get them out. And I'm thrilled we did, because he looks awesome when he's got whip and sword and shield, and I mean, he is like really loaded up when you give him all of the accessories that the Horsemen intended for him. And yeah, the idea of having him go without parts the Horsemen wanted, I wanted to do right by them, and I'm glad we did, because they designed an amazing figure, and I was so glad they got to do this. And Eric also told me it was a huge honor. It was one of the best things they got to do. So Drago Man was awesome. He was great, and I'm so glad we got to welcome him into the line and finally have a dragon character.